Was it a crazy man living in the woods? My boyfriend booked a stay at an off-the-grid Airbnb cabin in Maine a year ago. It had an excellent review by a previous guest, but not any other reviews. It appeared to be a relatively new listing, but it looked romantic in a scenic area. It was remote down a very long dirt road, more of a drivable path than a road. As you entered, there was a Vermont casting wood stove for heat against the wall. Electricity was provided by a generator for the night. Still, there were only a few lights, a small refrigerator, and an electric cook stove. The bed was in the loft above, with a view of the living room. Outside was a wood-heated hot tub. It was all charming and very romantic for a getaway. We arrived just after 4 in the afternoon and had a wonderful time cooking dinner and playing chess by the light of the fire. Since it was a long drive to the cabin, I climbed into the loft and slept while my boyfriend hung out on the front porch playing his harmonica. After 20 minutes, I was in that zone between deep sleep and awareness. My mind wasn't very alert when I was startled and fully awakened by a banging on the backside of the cabin. My boyfriend yelled up to me, asking if I was doing something in the loft. I was dazed and thought I had dreamt it. I yelled back, "No, it's not me." He was outside and saw no one. Since there were a lot of trees around, we concluded it must have been a tree branch that hit the house. All was quiet, so I closed my eyes to sleep. Again, a louder whacking sounded from another part of the cabin. This time I jumped up and climbed down to the living room just as my boyfriend ran through the door shouting, "Get a knife and get back up to the loft." He was trying to be calm, but I could tell he was freaked. Cautiously I whispered, "What is it?" "I don't know, but I heard footsteps." As we looked at each other, we heard a low grating noise that moved slowly against the cabin wall. Then it was again silent. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. We had parked our car about 80 feet from the house behind some spruce, so we could not see it from the cabin. So, to make a run for it was risky in the dark. We might encounter whoever or whatever it was. They could have slashed our tires or blocked us. Maybe that's what they wanted us to do. We both stayed silent, and I went back up to the loft with a kitchen knife while my boyfriend stayed in the living room with a poker from the wood stove as a weapon. I wanted to stay with him, but he said it was easier to fight without me there if it came to that. I hid in the loft as my boyfriend yelled, "Hello?" to see if anyone would answer or scare away any wild animal if that's what it was. For 20 minutes, we heard nothing. Then a deafening scratching sound. Not animal but metallic like a shovel, dragged against the cabin, accompanied by very clear footsteps. The banging and scraping intensified, so my boyfriend climbed into the loft, pulling up the ladder after him. At midnight, we realized we were stuck here until morning. We sat in silence. The noises were intermittent. Sometimes it was scraping or banging, and sometimes we thought we heard growling. It came from all sides of the house. It didn't sound animal, and the sound of the crunch, crunch, crunch of footsteps was very human. This continued for hours, intermittent with bursts of noise and then silence. We were paralyzed with fear, just staring at each other. I was terrified we would both be murdered in the most gruesome manner. The light of dawn finally lit the cabin, and we could hear morning birds chirping. All the terrible noises had stopped. We grabbed our things and bolted to the car. Thankfully, it was untouched. My boyfriend, feeling more confident, ventured back up to the cabin to investigate and found nothing outside. There are no scratches or scrapes in the wood or footprints or tracks on the ground. Was it a crazy man living in the woods trying to chase us off, or a wild animal? We don't know even now. Regardless, I am happy we weren't murdered at that Airbnb. I sprang for the kitchen knives, thinking of seizing my biggest butcher knife, but it was missing. I own a beach house in North Carolina near Kill Devil Hills on the other banks as a second home. It's a 3-bedroom, single bath across the road from the beach. I Airbnb the 2 guest bedrooms in the summer, keeping the master bedroom for my clothing and personal stuff. This way, I don't have to carry my stuff back and forth when renters are here. I have a key lock and a deadbolt, so no one can access that bedroom. Most of the time, I live in Chapel Hill, a little over a 4-hour drive to Kill Devil Hills. Since the weather was nice and no Airbnb guests booked, I decided to go to the beach house for the week. I have worked remotely since COVID-19 began, and I love it. The last guest left the morning before, and the cleaning service usually comes after. This time there was a scheduling conflict. However, that didn't bother me as I could save the money and clean it myself since I would be there. The Airbnb booking service listed the last guest as a man named Raphael. Through a series of messages, I knew his fiancée would be with him for the weekend. He asked about restaurants near, and where to find the Wright Brothers National Memorial and things such as that. He seemed like a friendly enough guy. He indeed came off as trustworthy. When I arrived at the house, it was about 9:30 and dusk. I was so bushed from the drive I just went straight to the master bedroom and unlocked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. I hadn't bothered to check the house as everything seemed clean despite having had a weekend guest. I was sound asleep in a minute. You'd have thought I slept through the night, but I woke, and the room was completely dark. The bedside clock read 11:50 p.m., so I had only slept a little over 2 hours. A sound had woken me up. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I investigated. I was startled when I looked around the living room and kitchen and saw everything was perfectly in place. Nothing had been touched, which is strange after an Airbnb rental before the cleaning service. I looked in the first guest bedroom, and it was unused. No one was there. The second bedroom was also empty, but the covers on the bed were tossed, so someone had been there. I thought they were the cleanest people ever renting my beach house. On the front porch, there is a security camera to monitor who comes into the house. This was a perfect time to open the app on my cell phone and check the recent history video. It did indeed record a man entering with the key code 3 days earlier. It was only a single man with no fiancée with him. I thought that strange, so I checked for the other recorded segments, and there were none. I looked 3 times to be sure, but there was no one else until I showed up. Chills suddenly went down my spine as I hadn't seen Raphael depart in any of the video histories. I quickly opened the Airbnb app and messaged Raphael. Even though it was now well past midnight, I went into the bedroom where the bed had been slept. I apprehensively opened the closet and peered under the bed. The second guest bedroom was untouched, but I checked the closet and under the bed. The room was empty. I sat on the end of the bed to let my heart settle and head clear, only to hear the faint sound of my master bedroom door closing. It clicked silently, but I still heard it. Someone was in the house. I quickly entered the living room and stared at my bedroom door, which was now closed. I had left it open when I had gotten up. I called out, "Raphael, are you here?" Under the door, I could see the bedside lamp was still on. I got down on my hands and knees to look under the door. I froze when I saw the shadows of 2 shoes behind the door. I sprang for the kitchen knives, thinking of seizing my biggest butcher knife, but it was missing. The intelligent thing to do was to get out of the house and call the police. Outside, away from the house, but in view of it. I waited for the police to arrive. When the police entered the house, they found Raphael sitting in the living room with no knife, but he acted surprised and said he just needed a place to stay for another night and didn't think anyone would mind. He rebuffed the idea that he had taken the butcher knife and the police found it in the woodblock where it belonged. He obviously conveniently replaced it before the police arrived. After 20 or 30 minutes, the police let Raphael go, and he promised to get a hotel out of Kill Devil Hills for the rest of the night. They suggested that I contact Airbnb and let them know about this client. I was disappointed with how the police just let him go. I updated the lock code to a new number and messaged Airbnb with the information and the police report. Airbnb didn't reimburse me for the unlawful stay, but they did block Raphael from using the app in the future. Nothing felt right about how this was handled by the police. This man would likely have stabbed me in my beach house in the middle of the night, and they would just let him go. Are there intentions to murder me? Last year, I was staying at a small Airbnb on a short getaway vacation. The place, as expected, was clean when I arrived. I checked it out, walking around before getting my bag from the car. It was a small place with 2 bedrooms, but very comfortable. I dropped into the big armchair and was just kinda resting from the drive. It was maybe 8:15 or so at night. So it was a shock to hear a knock on the front door. I was a bit blurry from dozing, so I was confused and alarmed. I'm 21, but a small girl in size. As I approached the door, I could hear 2 men outside. I usually don't frighten easily, but I don't like talking with unknown men alone, especially after dark. The door had no chain lock, so I spoke through it without opening it. I was uncomfortable because I could hear them whispering on the other side. Hello? Hey, we're here for the Airbnb. Can you open the door? You're here for the Airbnb? I didn't fully understand what that meant, a repair or something. The man responded that he had the house booked for the night. This had to be a mistake. I responded that I had reserved it and that he needed to contact the landlord. The man seemed irritated at that, and I probably would have been too if it was me on the other side after a long drive. I could hear the second man walking away while the first guy insisted I open the door to discuss this. I was just about to open the door as the man did sound reasonable. Still, as I put my hand on the handle, I got a huge shiver. So instead, I said, "My husband will speak with you as soon as he gets out of the shower." I was hoping he would just go away after hearing this, but he stayed at the door. I went over to the window and peered out from behind the curtain to avoid being seen, and what I saw scared me into near fainting. The man was facing away from the door, looking down at the street. It was one of the most alarming and terrifying moments in my life. A group of men, all with something covering their faces, stood in the dark as if waiting for a high sign to come. I couldn't see the other side, but I assumed that there was even more that I could not see. It was a gang, and it horrified me. I was trapped. I panicked and started to hyperventilate, getting dizzy as I ran down to the bedroom to lock the door and get my cell phone. I took my phone into the bathroom, closed that door, and dialed 911. The dispatcher told me to remain calm and stay quiet, but I was a wreck, and it was impossible to remain calm. My heart was pounding through my chest. She said a police unit would be there in just a few minutes. I stayed on the line with her crying as I could hear men slamming into the front door until I heard the wood door frame crack and the sound of boots entering the house. There were many boots and loud sounds as they moved throughout the house, searching for me. In a second, a gang member tried the locked bedroom door and yelled, "She's here!" He then walked away as the others looted the house. I could hear in the distance the police sirens, and so could they, and they rushed out before the police pulled up front. The house was trashed, and my travel bag and computer were gone. My car windows at the curb were smashed. The car was also looted, but there wasn't anything of value in it. One officer took my statement and informed me that this was a problem in this area, and that they had had a rash of gang break-ins and home invasions. The main goal seems to be robbery and not to hurt the residents. If their intentions were to hurt me or not, it was still a terrifying experience. After a day or two, I knew this had nothing to do with me staying at an Airbnb, but with the city area I had chosen. I'll be forever paranoid when I stay at an Airbnb alone. For more frightening and chilling nightmares, click subscribe if you dare.